The serve is the most valuable ally you can have in tennis, and believe me, it's worth the effort to go out and practice long and hard to get a good serve. To help us with this tough shot, let's bring in a man who was ranked #1 in the United States mainly due to his serve, Charlie Pasarell.
It has been said that the serve is the most important stroke in the game, and I happen to believe that. It is the most important stroke in the game. It is how you begin every point. If you can have a good serve and begin the point with a big, hard, well-placed serve, you're going to have an advantage in that point. You're going to start it off as a winner. There are 4 fundamentals to every stroke in the game of tennis. The first fundamental is the grip. If you're having trouble with your serve, I recommend that you begin with the forehand grip. The reason for that is simply you'll make better contact with the ball with a forehand grip. The finger position should be 3 fingers, then the thumb, and then the trigger finger or the forefinger should be spread out over the racket a little more. So if you're a beginner, I recommend that you start with the forehand grip. Also, if you're having troubles with your serve, go more towards the forehand grip. As you progress, and it will happen gradually, you can then start moving to a more of a continental or even to a backhand grip position. This will allow you to impart more spin into the ball. Serving is similar to throwing a ball. The motion is very much the same. The body and weight transfer is very much the same. Just remember that the front foot has to be planted down and you push off that front foot. It's your anchor foot. This gives you better rhythm, better balance, more control. The second fundamental is balance. First, let's talk about how should you place your feet in the court. Well, you want to be sideways in relation to the net. At the same time, you want to put your feet in such a position so that if you were to lay your racket in your toes, that racket will be pointing at that service box that you're serving to. So this will give you the basic feet positioning in the serve. Balance is perhaps the most overlooked part of the serve or any stroke. And to me, it's a very important part because if you can control your body, then you can control the racket. And if you can control the body and the racket, then you can control the ball. By the time you make contact with the ball, practically all of your weight, 99% of your weight, should be in the front foot, in your anchor foot. As a matter of fact, even 100% of your weight can be in your front foot because you're trying to move forward into the court or forward into the ball. You're trying to transfer all of your weight. One thing that I must warn you is that if you step forward into the court before you've made contact with the ball, you have lost all the value of the proper transfer of weight. It's a very common mistake for people to step into the court before they've made contact with the ball. So you do not want to step forward into the court until after you've completed your swing. If you're a beginner, a good method to try to develop the proper weight transfer and balance is to try to hit a serve without stepping across with your rear foot as you complete the serve. The third fundamental is the swing or the stroke. There are 3 parts to the swing. First, the wind-up. Wind-up simply means getting your racket up into the hitting position area. There are many kinds of wind-up. For example, Stan Smith has a long wind-up where he brings his racket way down. Pancho Gonzalez has a roundhouse wind-up. The important thing is to get the racket in here and make sure your elbow is up. One of the common mistakes I see is that players have a tendency of dropping their elbow when they get into the wind-up position. So make sure your elbow is up. All right. The second part of the swing is the toss. And I mean toss. I don't mean throwing the ball up in the air. You toss the ball up in the air. In order to develop a good, consistent toss, you must have a good grip on the ball. Now, the proper way to grip the ball is in your fingertips. When you put the ball up in the air, you toss the ball up in the air. You do so by holding the palm of your hand facing up towards the sky with a relatively straight arm position. This will help you develop a more consistent toss of the ball. You may ask, well, what is the right spot to toss the ball? Well, it varies from player to player. Depends on how long their arms are, what kind of frame that they have in their shoulders. So my good toss position is somewhere up here. So I set up an imaginary point up here, somewhere up there, and that's where I should try to toss the ball. I always should try to hit the ball at its peak. maybe when the ball is starting to just drop, because it is at that position, once I've made the toss and the ball starts dropping up, that the ball will somehow sit there in almost a motionless position. And that should be my goal, to try to hit the ball at that peak. The third part of the swing is the hit and the follow-through. Once you have made a good toss and you've already made your wind-up, the hit is like hammering a nail on the wall. When you hammer a nail on the wall, you simply move your wrist back. You don't move much of your arm, but you somehow just wrist it in. And you want to have that kind of wrist action, hammering the nail on the wall. Now in the follow-through, when you complete the follow-through, the arm position should be in an X position like this, your left hand inside, your right arm across your body like this, and as you then complete your swing, you then step forward, because the weight has transferred so far forward, you have stepped forward with your back foot into this position. One good way to add power into your serve is to create a bow effect by throwing your hip out and keeping your shoulders behind the ball, behind the court, and bending your body in this way so that when you approach the ball, you're coming up on the ball, you're hitting up on the ball more, and you're adding tremendous amount of power. There are three basic types of serve. First, the flat. That's very similar to a pitcher's fastball. What you want to try to do is you want to try to meet the ball squarely behind. This ball will not spin very much. It is probably the hardest hit ball. It is the fastest moving ball. The second kind of serve is a slice serve. What you try to do there is you try to hit the outside part of the ball. You try to come around the ball. This ball will move from right to left for a right-handed server and will skid away. You move the ball away or into the player's body, depending on which side you serve to. Then the third kind of serve is the twist serve. The twist serve, you try to hit either the inside part of the ball or the top part of the ball. This serve will have a tendency of making a curve and kicking very high up on the court once it bounces on the court. If you develop a good twist serve, it can even take a reverse bounce. In other words, it'll start moving from right to left, and as it hits a court, then it moves from left to right. A good kick serve is a very effective serve, but it's also the hardest serve to hit and control. Let's go back and talk a little bit about the mechanics of the three basic serves: the flat, the slice, and the twist. As I said before, the flat, you want to try to hit the ball square behind. Now, you do not adjust your toss to the three kinds of serve. Your toss remains pretty much the same for all three serves. You try to toss the ball in that same spot. What you do change is your relationship or how you approach the ball with your body and racket towards that ball. For a flat serve, you try to meet it square, so your shoulders should be relatively close, but still you want to be rotating a little bit so you're able to hit a flat serve. For the slice serve, the approach is more to come to the outside part, so your shoulders will have a tendency of opening up just slightly more than the flat serve, so you can come around the ball. For the twist serve, your shoulders, since you're trying to hit the inside part of the ball, your shoulders will stay even further closed than on the flat serve, and you try to come up and over the ball and then finally open at the finish of the serve. How about the grips for the three kinds of serve? Should you change your grip? Well, you can if you want. If you're having trouble hitting a serve, or if you're a beginner and you're having trouble hitting a flat serve, maybe go more towards the forehand grip. This will allow you to put the face of the racket a little more square behind the ball. For a slice serve, go more towards the continental grip, more on top, the hand more on top of the racket, so you can come around the ball a little more. But an accomplished player who has a good serve should try to hit all three serves with the same grip. A good server is not somebody that has an extremely hard first serve and just lobs the ball into the court in a second serve. That's not a good serve. A good server is the person that there is very little difference between his first serve and his second serve. If you have a weak second serve, it probably is because you're afraid to miss it. You're playing it too conservative. Don't be afraid to miss your second serve. Go out and take a few chances in second serve. Try to take your time in between your first serve miss and think. Think before you hit that second serve and take a few chances. Be more aggressive. Let's talk about some of the common faults in serving and what we can do about them. Let's talk about the fault of not being able to hit the serve with any kind of power. I can't hit my serve hard enough. Well, what can I do about it? Well, again, balance is an important part. Keep your front foot planted down. Also, develop a nice rhythm, a nice tempo through the serve. Do not rush the serve. Remember, power comes from good timing, good rhythm, and good balance. It doesn't come from strength or speed. The proper sequence in the serve is wind up first, then toss, and then the hit and the follow through. Now, a common mistake I see amongst club players is that they will toss the ball first, and then they try to do the wind up and then hit through the ball. So remember, do your wind up first, then the toss, and then hit through. As you progress in the game, you will then start coordinating the first two parts, wind up and toss, into one motion, so it becomes synchronized. Hitting the serve into the net is a very common mistake, and it probably happens because you're opening up your shoulders too quickly on the shot, and you're bringing your head down and pulling away from the hitting area too soon. One thing you can do to try to prevent this from happening is to try to keep your head up through the point of contact, even after you've made contact with the ball, and don't bring your head down until after you've finished your swing. If you're hitting the serve long all the time, that can be as a result of, one, you need to improve your balance. You're not making very good contact with the ball and you're losing control. Or it is possible that you're not putting enough spin on the ball to try to bring the ball down and make the ball dip into the court. So work on your balance, or try to put some more spin on your serve to try to control the serve. The serve is one of the few strokes that you can practice on your own. You don't need another person to go out and practice your serve. You can take a bucket of balls and go out and practice your serve. Remember that your serve is always going to be as good as your second serve. So practice second serving instead of first serving. If you want to practice placement, take some targets out there, some tennis cans, anything that may be a target to shoot at. When you go out to practice, make sure you go out and you practice with a specific goal in mind, and practice and concentrate on what you set out to practice. Now that's the serve. It's not an easy stroke, but it's the only stroke that you have full control of. You're not reacting to a ball. So learn a good serve and you'll play better tennis.
And now for a little added bonus. What can we learn from watching a great power server, Roscoe Tanner? You know, the more you lean into the serve and still maintain control and balance, as Roscoe does, the more pace you're going to get on the ball. Notice he has one of the shortest and fastest backswings. He also hits the ball before it peaks and gets so much body help. That's really what I'd call controlled power. The lob has to be the most underrated shot in tennis. In fact, I'd like to say that I call it the point saver. Because many times when I was playing tennis and my opponent had me way back by the fence, I'd throw up this nice high lob and get back into the point fight. Let's go to a man who really understands the lob from all aspects, Marty Riessen.
I like to think of the lob as the stroke that we all started out with at about age 6, when we played it about 95% of the time, just to keep the ball in the tennis court. It's that high looping shot that just stays maybe 20 feet over the net. But then as we get a little bit older, we stop using the lob. And by the time you're in your 20s, 30s, it really gets to be a shot that you don't use enough. And I want to talk about the lob because I think it's a shot that you should use more. The thing to remember about the lob is that the grip is exactly the same as you would use for your ground stroke. If you were going to hit a forehand ground stroke, you would use the same grip for the forehand lob. And the reason for this is disguise, because when you come into the stroke, you want to make it look like it's a regular ground stroke and then go into the lob. The lob starts out just like a ground stroke. You see the ball coming, you use the same grip as a ground stroke, your knees bent as you step forward, and as you bring the racket through, instead of meeting the ball with the racket head perpendicular to the ground, the racket face becomes tilted back so you give lift to the ball, thus making it a lob. Your follow-through will be a little higher than a ground stroke, but it is a complete follow-through. The same is true of the backhand lob. Same backswing, and then the follow-through is up and out. So remember, the lob is a complete stroke. There's a backswing, and when you step in to make contact, the racket face is tilted, and the follow-through is up and out. Let's talk about the defensive lob. This shot is the one that's going to get you out of trouble if you're in trouble. It'll give you time to retrench if you're way out of court, and most of all, it could break up the rhythm of your opponent. The situation for the defensive lob occurs when you're caught behind the baseline and you really can't make a good passing shot. So now you have to toss a real high ball up, maybe 20 to 30 feet up in the air, and try and get as much depth as possible into the back of the court, near your opponent's baseline. And this shot can be played either down the line or cross court. You have a little more room in the court. The defensive lob is to get you out of a real problem. Remember, toss that ball up there real high and get back to the center of the court for the next shot.
The volley is what I call the knockout punch in tennis. And whether you're up in this position because you've come in on a good approach shot or somebody's brought you into the net, you've got to have a good shot to put that ball away and produce yourself a winner. Speaking of winners, let's let a winner help you with your volley. Brian Gottfried.
The volley can be one of the easiest strokes to master if you can overcome one thing, fear of getting hit by the tennis ball. It's a lot simpler than a lot of you realize, and you can also have a lot of fun with the volley too. Let's take a closer look at it. Let me say a few basic things about the volley first. The volley is a ball taken out of the air as opposed to the ground stroke, which the ball is bounced first. When you've taken the ball out of the air, usually you're at the net, and the ball is traveling a lot quicker than for the ground stroke, so you've got to watch it closer, you've got to take a shorter swing. It's just a punch stroke. The volley is good for the aggressive style. You're hitting it a lot harder normally, and you can get a lot better angle and usually end the point with the volley. Let's talk about the grip a little bit. I would suggest that since you have so little time here at the net when you're hitting the volley, you've got to keep a grip somewhere in between your Eastern forehand grip and your normal backhand grip. You've got to keep a grip where you can hit the forehand and the backhand volley with the same grip. Next, the ready position. I think on the volley, it's especially important to have a good ready position on your toes because, again, there's so little time that you have to be ready to move right or left very quickly. Also, it's important to have the racket in front of you because, again, the movement is so quick, you've got to be ready to go both ways. Where do you meet the volley now? I like to hit it about 1.5 to 2 feet in front of my body with the racket head above the wrist and a good firm wrist squeezing onto the racket tightly. Since the ball is coming at you so quickly for the volley, one of the most important things to remember is to keep the stroke short on the volley. It should be about 2 to 3 feet long, but the stroke should all take place in front of you. The racket should never get behind the body. And in order for you to get a little bit of power on that stroke, you should always try to be stepping forward. Have your body going forward as much as possible on the stroke. Here's a few volleys that you're going to face up here. We can start with the high volley, which is probably the easiest of any of them. I say it's the easiest because you don't have to contend with the net. A lot of times you'll get a high volley. The tendency is to hit straight down. The only thing you do have to remember, though, is to hit through the ball. Now, the low volley is going to be a little bit more difficult to hit. One of the most important things about the low volley now is bending the knees, getting down to the ball. It's also difficult to hit a good shot, so you want to try just to put the ball back deep and not do too much with it. The wide volley is just a slight variation off a normal volley. You just got to move your feet and make sure that you get to the ball. That's the important thing. When the volley's right at you, that can give you most trouble. I think you should basically hit a defensive volley off of it, not trying to hit a winner off it. When I volley, I like to concentrate on just keeping it simple.
The drop shot's one of the great weapons in tennis. And also, it's a lot of fun to play it. because it really is fun to see your opponent come all the way from the baseline up here just to get that drop shot, and sometimes he slips and falls a little for you. But the tough thing about it is if you don't play it perfectly, the chances are you're going to lose the point. So to help you with this big problem, let's go to Marty Reeson.
The drop shot is a very special shot. It's a shot that you caress and you try and hit it just over the net with a little bit of backspin so it bounces twice before your opponent can get to it. It has to bounce very low and is especially good on some surfaces, much better on clay and on grass than it is on cement or asphalt. The technique on the drop shot is much like an approach shot. It starts out like you're moving into the net for an approach, kind of a short backswing. You caress the ball and drop the racket head under, imparting backspin. So the ball will just clear the net and have this backspin, which will stop the ball and keep it low once it's cleared the net. The technique on the forehand drop shot, where the ball is hit with underslice, is much the same as on the backhand, where you again come under the ball with a little bit more slice. There are certain situations that you should use the shot, and that's basically when your opponent is behind the baseline and you're inside your own baseline. Another time you might try the drop shot for an element of surprise would be on someone's second serve, because usually they'd stay right on the baseline and you could drop the ball right over the net. Where do you place the drop shot on the court? Well, I can play it in two places, either down the line or cross court. The main reason is you want to keep it nearer to the sidelines so that your opponent has to play over the high part of the net. Usually you try and play to your opponent's weakness and then just keep it short and try and keep it low. There are two types of opponents that the drop shot is especially effective against. The first one is the slowpoke who can't get to the net to get that ball, and the second one is the person who doesn't want to come to the net in the first place to make a volley. So you draw them in with a drop shot, and if they get to the ball, then you pass them or lob over their head. But against these opponents, or any opponents, you can't use the drop shot too often because they'll get to the net too quickly for you. So remember, the important thing is the element of surprise. Here's a hint on how I like to practice the drop shot. I like to start out with the ground stroke and then move to an approach shot. And then I try and hit a short ball with underspin until I have the drop shot.
The smash is a shot that doesn't come into play too often, but when it does, it's usually very important. You've had a good approach shot or maybe a deep volley, and up comes a big, tall lob. You've got to have a smash to take care of this. And who's better to tell you about it but a fellow that has one of the great ones, Stan Smith.
We're going to talk about the overhead now, or what's commonly known between the players as the smash. I think the word smash describes the feeling that you want to have as you hit it, and the feeling that many of the spectators have when they see it hit. This stroke is really like the serve, but the motion is more compact, and will be a shortened swing motion. It's really an aggressive shot. This shot should be the shot you hit to end a point. Your opponent shouldn't be getting it back. Now I'd like to talk about a few of the technical points about the smash. First of all, the grip. You want to use a grip which is just like your service grip, which is a continental grip. Now, most of you hit a forehand with this grip with a V between your thumb and your forefinger right on top of the grip. Well, for the continental grip, you want to move that V one turn to the left so that your hand is more on top of the racket, and you have a little bit more of your hand behind the racket as you're coming through to hit the serve. Okay, now the next thing about the smash is you want to get sideways as soon as you see the ball go up in the air. Now, the reason you want to do that is so that you can shuffle back in a much more comfortable position and get back quicker this way. In getting back quick, you realize that if you can get back, you can always go forward. But if you don't get back quickly, you're going to have trouble reaching for that ball over your head. Early preparation is really one of the first keys of the smash. You want to get the racket back as quickly as possible as soon as you see the ball going up as a lob. The next thing is, as you see the ball go up in the air, you want to get your arm in this cocked position. Now, as you do that, you can use your free hand, or your left hand if you're right-handed, to focus on the ball. Some players even point at the ball. Now, as your right arm goes back in its cocked position, your left arm will be up here to kind of counterbalance the weight of your right arm being back. The arms kind of work in opposite directions to help you keep the balance. You can also use this left arm to shade the sun from your eyes. Weight transfer is important for both power and accuracy in your smash. As you get your racket back in this cocked position, you'll be shuffling back, so you want to get back as quick as possible to be able to step forward as you hit the ball. The ideal thing is to get back in time to be able to step forward like you would on your serve and transfer your weight to your forward foot. Or if you're hitting the ball, jumping forward, then you want to transfer your weight from the back part of your shoulder forward to the front part of the shoulder. The follow-through for the smash, as in the other strokes, is really vital to your accuracy and power. You want to follow through right in the direction you're trying to hit the ball, just like you would on your service motion. This will give you the opportunity to hit the ball where and when you want to.
Arthur starts his warm-up by jogging. Notice how Arthur's changed the jog to a side step. And this is a little more of the kind of footwork he's going to use when he actually gets out in action. Now, this is the very famous Arthur Ashe Shuffle. I suggest you try it sometime. He's swinging those arms pretty well ready to go.
I start by rolling my head around on my shoulders like this. Don't do it too quickly or snappishly because the muscles are cold and you could hurt yourself. Next, arms out from the shoulders, wave them around, elbows straight in an ever-widening circle. This is warming up the shoulder sockets so you can serve, move your arms about freely. This should hurt just a tiny bit at first, but then you get over that initial ache. Then, waving the arms out from the shoulders like this, first forward, then backwards. As the shoulder muscles loosen up even more. Then with the left arm, forward, backwards. Those muscles in the back and the side that you need when you're serving, very slowly, and you'll start to feel those muscles in the back loosen up as you're able to go over further and further each time. Then bend over at the waist with the knees slightly bent. Bend the knees slightly. Hold it for about 5 seconds. Come up with the knees bent. Don't lock the knees. And go down a little bit farther this time. Keep the knees slightly bent. Try to touch the ground if you can, like I'm doing here. Do one deep knee bend, like this. You'll feel those cartilages and ligaments in the knee start to crack a little bit. Everybody will hear that. Okay. Grab the side of the net just like this. Grab the back, the front of your foot like this, and just gently pull, gently, gently. What you're now doing is loosening up the quads. These muscles here, those are the muscles that take you around the court when you run. Nice and slow. Okay. Now, what we finish with is to jump up in the air 10 times as high as you can. Okay, you do that 10 times, and you're ready to play.